In 1997, I was touring in Europe, and I got in the mail a written proposal from a guy named Bob Saden, a musician, that proposed an idea of me recording an album that would be a tribute to George Gershwin, to kind of honor the 100th anniversary of George Gershwin's birth. I love Gershwin's music, and I always have. But that alone wasn't enough to attract me to doing an album to honor Gershwin. But what made me kind of curious and interested in this particular proposal is because he suggested that maybe we could use maybe 3 different kinds of musical settings for the music. And one idea was to do a piece that was not written by Gershwin, one that was written by Maurice Ravel, because Gershwin and Ravel were not only friends, but they also influenced each other. And I thought that was an interesting idea. It would mean that I'd have to learn this Ravel piece and play it with an orchestra. So, I love that idea. And maybe play a solo piece and then do some with a group, a small group. Well, Bob Saden flew over to France a few days later to meet me and talk about this idea. And what we really came up with was an expansion of just what could be a typical approach to George Gershwin's music. What we decided to do was create a new concept, which would be based off of the idea of Gershwin's world. Because I certainly didn't want to give people the impression that George Gershwin was the founder of jazz, and make him the king and the focal point of jazz. That would have been misleading, because if jazz hadn't existed, none of us would ever hear of George Gershwin. So what we decided to do was to have a piece that would kind of represent the early beginnings of jazz, which was St. Louis Blues, written by W.C. Handy. And then, of course, have some George Gershwin pieces, and have also a piece written by James P. Johnson, who was a great ragtime pianist and composer that was a good friend of Gershwin's, who was one of his contemporaries. But he had a very big influence on George Gershwin's piano playing, because George Gershwin was a great ragtime piano player himself. But James P. Johnson was also a great influence on Gershwin's concepts for music. James P. Johnson himself had written an opera which never really got any notice by the public. But we have to remember about what the racial situation might have been at that time. And I'm sure it was very difficult for a black composer to get the kind of attention that George Gershwin, a young white Jewish kid, could get. So regardless of his talent, Gershwin did get the attention, but George Gershwin was also very daring, because his first opera was written about black life, Porgy and Bess. It was a story written about the black experience, so to speak. I'm sure that took a lot of courage for him to do that, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't want him to do that, but he stood by his guns, and he did his research. From what I understand, he traveled through the South, stayed with black families, and went to gospel churches, and really, instead of being an outside observer, he really kind of absorbed himself into black life in the South. And so he created Porgy and Bess, which became a really huge success. Anyway, so we do some pieces from Porgy and Bess. We did some for the original album, which was called Gershwin's World. And we also did the Ravel piece, concerto in G major, the second movement of that concerto with an orchestra. And we also did a piece by Duke Ellington called Cottontail. And Cottontail was written off of the chord changes of the song I Got Rhythm, or we call it was written from rhythm changes in the jazz vernacular. So this way we get a chance to really kind of describe Gershwin's world. But at the same time, instead of just having 3 different musical settings, each piece for Gershwin's world had its own unique musical setting. And that idea was much more intriguing to me. It was also a lot more work. It's almost like each piece in itself was a concept for a whole album. So anyway, we completed the piece, and we were very fortunate in that it was recognized by the music industry, and that 3 Grammy Awards were awarded for Gershwin's World. And then I decided to take the album on the road, so to speak. By the way, I should mention that I had the wonderful assistance of some incredible and very famous and talented musicians on Gershwin's World. Stevie Wonder, Kathleen Battle, Ron Carter, Chick Corea, and many others, Joni Mitchell. I was very fortunate to be able to use those musicians and many others in putting that together. Wayne Shorter is another one, my favorite composer and saxophone player, and my best friend. Wayne is a unique and individual player that is constantly creating new things. I don't think Wayne can do anything else but create something new every time he puts the horn to his lips or puts the pen to his hand. So we took a band on the road, which didn't include those singers, but on the first tour, we actually used local singers in many of the European countries to sing some of the vocal songs from the album, and that was an interesting idea too. But recently we've been playing all the pieces with just the instruments, because the music has really been able to develop in the hands of the great musicians that I have now, which you'll find on this DVD. I'm very honored and proud to be able to work with Cyril Batista on percussion, Terry Lynn Carrington on drums, Ira Coleman on bass, Eddie Henderson on trumpet and flugelhorn. And those are the musicians that were on the Gershwin's World CD. And with the addition of one musician who was not on the CD, Ellie DeGibri, a great saxophone player, great young saxophone player, And you'll get a chance to hear it, and I hope you like it.
Music can lead you in many directions, but there's only one place where you can find the rhythms of jazz 24 hours a day. Classic, contemporary, blues and bossa nova.
Music is a journey. The destination, the Jazz Channel.